السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So, Jazakumullah khair for coming out tonight. We're very honored today to have Dr. Sharif al-Tubji visiting our masjid. So Dr. Sharif, a little background on him, and I won't belabor it because he just told me not to mention too much. But Dr. Tobji is a professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies and the director of the Arabic Language Program at Brandeis University. He's written a monograph on Ibn Taymiyyah's 10-volume work, Refutation of Contradiction Between Reason and Revelation. He's also translated another work from German, Farid Suleiman's work on Ibn Taymiyyah attributes, but he's been, I'd say over the past few years, one of the leading thinkers on the topic of Islam and sexual and gender ethics and morals. He has an interview that he did with Paul Williams, which was in excess of 4 hours, I believe. What was it? Just under 4 hours. But it's exceptional. It really is very, very well done. So I would highly encourage reviewing that as a resource. He just completed a 3-part series in Arabic, which is over 11 hours in length, on a podcast channel called Idrak. So if you're interested in reviewing that, again, on the same topic. And so tonight he'll be addressing that topic for us, doing his best to synthesize and synopsize the high points. We'll go till Salat al-Isha, inshallah, and then afterwards we'll do a Q&A. So without any further ado, I'll be handing things over to him. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here in this beautiful masjid, mashallah, this beautiful community, in such beautiful weather. I understand it was quite cold a couple of days ago, but it's been very seasonably warm and nice since I've been here. We have about 40 minutes, I think, until prayer. So what I want to do is just kind of lay out some general ideas in thinking about this topic of, gender and sexuality more generally, but LGBTQ, well, what's called LGBTQ. And I put it in quotes because, we need to question terms and categories because, as I always like to say, language is not innocent. Words carry, conceptual frameworks with them. The words we use to describe things, they cause us to conceive of things in a particular way, right? And so even the term LGBTQ is very new. When I was growing up, there was no such thing. I don't know about when you were growing up. You're younger than I am. But this is maybe even the mid-90s. We didn't have this term. We just said homosexuality, gay, that existed. But LGBT, this is like a more recent term. So we need to question terms and categories so that we can come to a proper understanding of things in line with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's revelation, through which he has revealed to us the truth about our world, about reality, right? And so we need to always go back to that. And when we do so, we also find that the truth as revealed by Allah, because he is the creator, it also conforms with what we find in the world around us, right? And so we need to start with that confidence, first of all, and then think through the issues that come up as challenges and try to come to a proper understanding of them. Of course, this issue of LGBT, Bismillah, I'm just using that as a shorthand for now. I don't think Muslims should be using the term, but it's the going term. How did we get here? I'm going to go through very quickly. How did we get here? And then talking about the importance of a conceptual framework. How we conceive of an issue is very, very important to dealing with it properly. And then I want to talk about a little bit about the Islamic paradigm because when we talk about, for example, homosexuality, this is a subset of sexuality, which is a subset of human actions, which is a subset of moral norms, right? And so for us as Muslims, the question of LGBTQ / same-sex relationships or whatever, however you want to phrase it, this has to be built into a larger framework that that makes sense within a larger Islamic paradigm. If we just jump in out of the cold, so to speak, and talk about LGBTQ the way it's being discussed in our society today, right? They are starting from very different presuppositions, a very different framework, a very different set of commitments, right? And so we won't really be able to make much sense of it, nor will we be able to really answer any questions in a satisfactory way from our own framework. So anyway, we probably won't get through all of this, but I want to at least just put some stuff out on the table, so to speak, until Isha, and then after Isha we'll pray and come back, and then I'd like to open it up for discussion, for questions and answers. I find that that's often the most instructive part, when people can actually say, well, this happened and I didn't know how to respond, or this has been really confusing me or causing doubts for me, and I'm not sure how to answer this question to myself or to my peers or something, right? I want to be able to hear from you and to discuss, inshallah. So if we just look, there's been a significant, I won't read all of this, but there's been a significant increase in the last decade, particularly decade and a half, in LGBT characters in books for children, books for kindergartners, preschoolers, elementary school, high school, right? All levels, you find a very strong push to kind of normalize and regularize LGBT characters who identify as transgender or homosexual, or who have, for example, two fathers or two mothers, right? In order for people to sort of grow up with a paradigm where this is something considered kind of a normal, natural, a variation on a family, for example, or human relationships, rather than being seen as something that is, odd, or that someone could have an opinion on, right? What they think about it morally. And so we see a very steep increase, especially since the year 2000, right? You see in 2010, there were 10 books published by mainstream publishers for young adults with LGBT characters. By 2016, only 6 years later, that climbs from 10 to 80. So there's an 8-fold increase, right? It's an enormous increase. Also in the media, 118 films that came out in 2019, 20% of them, almost 18%, had LGBT characters. If you look at the data from 2010, I'm in the middle there, through 2020, so one decade, especially in the latter 5 years, so 2015 to 2020, the representation of overtly queer characters skyrockets in cartoons for children, right? Cartoons for children. Sesame Street, SpongeBob, these kind of staples of children's viewing, right? Disney also is becoming more and more aggressive and forthright about introducing LGBT themes and characters in their production for children. Schools also, many schools now mandate kind of LGBT curriculum, teaching about gender to very young grades. And when I say teaching about gender, I mean teaching about it in a very specific way, not just teaching that, there's male and female. And I mean, we would agree with that, but they teach it as, gender is something subjective, it's psychological. Some people are men, some people are women, some people are both, some people are neither. They present this as kind of, that's what they mean by teaching gender, right? And so you have this genderbread person. I don't know if people have seen that. This is obviously meant for children. This cute little it's like gingerbread cookie, right? It's a genderbread person. And they are sort of promulgating this paradigm that you have biological sex, which is your body. So they put it down in the, sex organs, male or female. That's kind of an objective fact. And then you have gender identity is in your brain. How do you see yourself? So I have a male body. I'm physiologically male, but I identify as a woman. So my sex is male, but my gender is a woman, right? So those are now two separate considerations. Of course, normally, if you are male physiologically, then you identify as a man or a boy, and vice versa for a woman. And traditionally, even in English, gender and sex were just synonyms. Like, what's your gender, what's your sex is kind of the same question. But now they've made a distinction. Sex is the body, and gender is kind of how you subjectively self-identify. And the idea here is that there's no reason for those to line up. Like the fact that they line up for most people, that's all fine and good, but that's just like a statistical accident. And, it's just as normal for them not to line up, for me to have a male body and identify as a woman, or have a female body and identify as a man, or identify as non-binary. Everyone's heard that term. What do you mean non-binary? Well, I'm neither a man nor a woman. Well, what do you mean? Well, I just don't identify as either one. So don't call me he or she, call me they. They is plural. I'm only one person, but they like obscures gender in English. Other languages, you couldn't really do that, but in English, you can do it, right? And then they say your attraction, who you're attracted to, they put it in the heart, but it's also like sexual attraction and arousal. That's a question of sexual orientation, right? So are you attracted to this opposite sex, the same sex, both sexes, right? That's the gay, straight, like bi And then gender expression, how do you express, like, okay, so I'm a male, but I, present as female. I have like long curly hair, wear a dress, nail polish, and I call myself Fatima. Okay, so my gender expression is feminine, but although I might say, but I'm a man, but I just express myself as a woman. Anyway, so the point is that now they are trying to teach children that all of these 4 considerations are just like free-floating variables, right? And there's no reason for them to all line up. That's just a social convention. But, we need to kind of accept diversity and the fact that people have different gender identities, different gender expressions, different sexual orientations. And all of this is kind of just presented as being, equally normative, right? Or there is no normativity, just everything's equally fine and the same. This is not, of course, a paradigm we would come from. And so kind of promulgating this in schools is serving a very particular agenda and trying to bring about a particular change in the way people see things on a societal level. And then global affairs, you have also, this LGBT being used to beat down other countries. Like Muslim countries are backwards and therefore colonizable, or subject to liable to be bombed, or or regime change effected in them because they oppress women and they don't accept homosexuality and all of this, right? So this is used. We saw this in the Afghanistan war. We need to go and free the Afghan women from the burqa. Now they're free. Now they're still wearing it, right? When the U.S. was there, the U.S. is gone. They were wearing it before. They're wearing it still, right? But the idea is we have to go and liberate them. So this is used sometimes to justify belligerent foreign policy. And then this we don't need to go into. This is a stupid thing. And, you can see here, this came out 2 years ago in Canada, this poster. They are specifically targeting Islam and Muslims, because if you look at the other religions, most of them have capitulated on this point. Many Christians and Jews in this country, they've become liberalized. They've reformed their religious teachings. They say, yeah, we don't believe homosexuality is a sin anymore. The story of Lot in the Bible, which is Qawm Lut, that's not really about homosexual behavior. It's just about, being inhospitable to guests, or about rape or something like that. And so Muslims, by and large, have not conceded this. We say, no, like it's clear in the Quran, and, our Sharia is very clear, and we're not, so far we haven't like en masse kind of conceded the point. And so you look at this picture, you have, of course, they put all kinds of like diversity, quote unquote. You have this male couple, one is white, like very white with blonde hair, the other one's black, so that's like biracial and homosexual, okay? And then you have this, black couple who's like heterosexual, so that's like, you can still be heterosexual, I guess, right? So that's there. And then you have this, the physical capability. So you have this person in a wheelchair who's a male, and the one next to him, I don't know if it's like a female, but that's like able-bodied and, what's the politically correct term? I'm not sure, but like someone who's not able-bodied, like, Yeah, but are you allowed to say that still? Disabled, you can? Okay. I don't know, because it's like changing all the time. And then look in the bottom left, I blotted it out, but you have these 2 Muslims, women, both in hijab, by the way, right? And in this picture, without the dot I put on it, they're like about to kiss, okay? So where's the person wearing a Christian cross? I don't see it. Where's the Star of David? I don't see it. Where's like some Hindu symbol? I don't see it. All I see is Islam presented here, right? Why Muslims particularly? Because they're trying to push this idea that, okay, Muslims, we need to bring them on board. And so we take Muslim symbols, and it's not just any symbol. That they don't have like a star and a crescent, like 2 guys. It's women in hijab, because the hijab is very symbolic of Islam. But not only that, the hijab, what does it stand for? It's not just Islam in general. The hijab stands particularly for like modesty, decorum, like sexual restraint, dignity, decency, all of these things, right? And so they take the very symbol of like modesty and iffa, which is a beautiful quality to have, right? And they take that and they put 2 women in hijab kissing like a lesbian kiss. Like, this is completely like, it violates what the hijab even means, but that's precisely the point, right? And so so you find this. There's a specific targeting really of Muslims. If we go back, we don't have too much time, but it's very important to realize that all of this that we're seeing in the West, this is relatively new. This is all a result of a movement that happened in the late 1960s called the Sexual Revolution. You can read about it. Most of you, the young people, you were born way after this. I was born in the mid 70s. So when I was growing up, the sexual revolution was still kind of going on, like the first, thrust of it. And it's a rejection of the traditional norms regarding gender, first of all, and sexual norms. So before the late 1960s, even in the West, something like zina, like premarital sex, it was really like not acceptable. Okay, it happened, like in the Muslim world, it happens, but it was like hush hush. It was not something that, especially for women, like most like decent girls didn't do that. They were virgins when they got married, even in America, like that was the norm, right? Not the norm now, but like that was the norm. It was impossible to live together without being married. That didn't happen. Like in the Muslim world, like that's still like that today. People, if they do like zina, unfortunately it exists, but it's kind of like done on the side, like it's not, it's hush hush. But you cannot in the Muslim world, anywhere in the Muslim world, to my knowledge, you can't just leave home and say, well, I'm just like renting an apartment with my boyfriend and we're just living together. Like that's just not, it's not possible. Like you just can't do that. There's no social space for that. That phenomenon doesn't exist. And that was the same here until really the late 1960s. And during the sexual revolution, they got rid of all of that. They said, we're not following those norms anymore. And so they started, we used to call it shacking up. That was the term for it, because it was still something like, people were getting used to it. But the idea that a man and a woman would live together without being married was like, that was a big deal. And they used to call it living in sin. They say, oh, someone's living in sin. It means they're living together without being married. You don't hear that anymore because that's like long gone. Most people don't consider it sinful anymore, except like very conservative Christians or maybe like Orthodox Jews. But the general population, like, so many people, it's become so normalized that the idea that this is like sinful behavior or something wrong with it is just, it's passé, like it's very, very, not done anymore. One of the main catalysts of the sexual revolution was the birth control pill, which comes out in, I think, 1959. And just very briefly, if you imagine a world before the birth control pill, there was really no very foolproof method of birth control before the pill. They had condoms. They were not very effective. Not like today. They're much more effective today. So the short and long of it was that in the end of the day, this is a reproductive act. We can give it other meanings that we want. It's about love. It's about commitment. It's about recreation. It's about pleasure. It's about whatever. And all of those are part of it. But in the end of the day, the act itself is reproductive. I mean, an act between a man and a woman, right? It's a reproductive act. And in a world where you don't really have birth control that's very reliable, every time a man and a woman engage in that act, there's always the chance / danger of pregnancy. And because of that, the consequences of sexual behavior are huge. You're talking about a woman getting pregnant, bringing a new life into the world. Abortion was not available, so you can't just be like, whoops, sorry, I'm going to abort it. I mean, that's a different moral discussion, but I'm just saying also it was illegal, it was not available, so that was not an option. There were people who tried to do it, but back alley abortions, very unsafe. Like it was not really a live option. Do you see? So this means that particular cultural and moral norms make sense. Because of the consequences of sexual behavior being very serious, it only makes sense for any society, any religious system, any ethical system to basically restrict sexual activity to marriage. And that's why you find that all across the world, across religions, across ethical systems, no society can just afford a sexual free-for-all, okay? What we see today is a sign of decadence of society. It's not a sign of liberation. It's not a sign of progress. It's not a sign of tolerance. It's a sign of decadence, right? We need to be very clear on that. You cannot have a sexually free society that's going to last very long because it undermines the basic structure of the society, which is the family, okay? And that was particularly true before the pill, but it's also true today, okay? Once the pill comes out, and you can now, and so because sexual activity, led to the consequences of pregnancy, again, it only made sense for it to be restricted to basically marriage, right? And that's why those norms you could see pretty much all over the world, you had like that norm in one form or another, there was something close to that. Once the pill comes along, it basically takes the consequences off the table. So now there's like free sex, okay? You can engage in the activity, and you don't really have to worry about the natural consequences anymore because you've artificially, controlled for them. And so people start to say, well, then why should we restrict ourselves to this moral norm when the consequences no longer exist? We can just do whatever we want. So this was really, I think, a major catalyst to the sexual revolution. The fact that Western society had become quite secularized by that time. And it's like people were just holding back, not through real conviction that, okay, we want to do what's right and avoid what's like haram or something like that. It's like they were just kind of afraid of the consequences. That's why they were holding back as a society. But once the consequences were gone, boom, like all hell broke loose very quickly. You know, I don't think you could have had a sexual revolution in the 1950s or 40s. I think it had to come after the pill, because the pill made it all of a sudden possible to even consider something like this, okay? Once you separate sexual behavior from pregnancy and therefore from like marriage and religion and religious morality, now you can start completely conceptualizing what sex is all about. If it's not primarily about reproduction and starting a family within marriage, then it can become whatever you want it to be. Like I said before, it can be primarily about love, primarily about commitment, primarily about pleasure, primarily about whatever you want. And if that's the case, then sex no longer has to necessarily be heterosexual. If sex is seen as something that's like in its essence a reproductive thing, then of course it has to be heterosexual. I mean, heterosexual to be justified, right? Because two men, two women can't reproduce. And if sex is primarily about reproduction, then it's clear that, you know, homosexual behavior would be seen as something wrong and something outside the moral norm and something that just goes against kind of the nature of the act if you conceive of the act as being primarily reproductive, okay? And that's how it was seen in Western society. But once you change what sex is all about, if it's just about pleasure, commitment, and love, then all of a sudden, you know, it becomes conceivable like, all right, well, maybe two men are attracted to each other and get pleasure, and maybe they love each other and they're committed, or two women or whatever. And that's why they say love is love. They say, well, love is love, but I'm not talking about love, I'm talking about sex, something different, right? They want to conflate the two. So the entire paradigm has changed. Now, the sexual revolution and everything that went with it, it led to many problems. The decline of the nuclear family, the explosion of divorce, right? Although the pill came about, you have to take it every day for it to be effective. A lot of women apparently didn't do that. So even after the pill, once the sexual norms were relaxed, the rate of illegitimate pregnancy, it actually skyrocketed. It was much higher after the pill than before the pill, because before the pill, people were actually like scared, you know, so you didn't have that much premarital activity, some, but not that much. After the sexual revolution became widespread, but not everyone was taking the pill. So you had a much bigger, you know, number. So what do they do to deal with that? Abortion. It's like an after-the-fact birth control. I got pregnant, well, now I can just get it aborted. I still don't have to worry about the consequences because I can just get rid of the baby. So abortion's not legalized till what, is it 1972, Roe? 1972. This is after, you know, it's like at the cusp of the sexual revolution. So abortion really is, it's like post fact abortion, birth control. It's when the birth control didn't work, you have a way that still allows you to have sex without dealing with the consequences. And if the consequences come about, well, now you have like a legal and kind of safe way to deal with the consequences. Whereas before, that wasn't really available either. Yeah. The Protestant movement? Not Protestant movement per se, but you had, that's a good question. You had the civil rights movement in the United States for equality for blacks, which we totally support, obviously, because, you know, there's no justification in Islam to have any laws that differentiate between people on the basis of race. That's completely not, you know, against the Sharia. So that was number one. You also had second wave feminism, right, which is this idea that men and women are completely the same and should be equal in all respects, legally and socially. Women should leave the home and work just like men do. And there's all the push to kind of like equalize the sexes and to minimize any differences between the sexes in their nature, in their roles, and all of that. So that was number two. And so and then you have the sexual revolution rejecting the traditional Christian moral norms. So all of this kind of comes together to, you know, to kind of and you had the Vietnam War going on too, and a lot of people, like young people, they were against the Vietnam War, so they were protesting. Like now, people are protesting about Palestine. They're protesting the Vietnam War, and they saw the whole political structure as corrupt. And part of the structure was like these moral norms. So they said we're rejecting everything, including like the church, including the government, including these old norms that have been inherited. And so they kind of just revolted against the whole thing. So that's the best I can do. But there's a lot of stuff going on. But this I think it was probably the convergence of all of that allowed for this type of. There were people who have been theorizing a sexual revolution since the 20s and 30s. Like the groundwork was laid. But I think the pill was a major, again, catalyst to now allow it to happen because, again, you kind of took the consequences, at least theoretically, off the table. And in the activities surrounding the civil rights movement, all of that, like, people were just in a very agitated mood and ready to question very basic structures. And then the gay rights movement piggybacks on that, right? Well, if we're going for equality for blacks and equality for women, well, now we're a separate group too, an identity group of gays or homosexuals. Again, LGBT didn't exist, that term, right? And so that piggybacks on it. And so they say, well, that becomes like a third kind of wave of that, right, of movement. Did you have a question? Yeah. Yeah, so homosexual behavior has existed for a long, long time. And it's existed in different societies, including Muslim societies. We have it in our literature. But the difference is, and we'll get to this actually now, the difference is, so I say here, the visibility and prominence of homosexuality and the gay rights liberation movement ride on the coattails of the sexual revolution. Okay, and here's one thing, and I'll come to your question right now, is that modern Western culture now separates three things that are tightly bound up with each other: sex, reproduction, and therefore marriage morality. We said in the past those were like tightly bound, okay? Which they are by nature because, reproduction is the natural consequence, and so that kind of makes sense. Now they've kind of split the atom, so to speak. So sex is one thing, reproduction is something else, morality is something else, marriage, these are all separate things now, okay? At the same time, they amalgamate three things that used to be considered separate, and now they're considered one thing. So desires, particularly homosexual desires, okay? Actions, meaning acting on those desires, and very importantly, identity, okay? So in the past, you had the behavior. In the West, in the East, the behavior existed. If the behavior existed, the desire existed because people are acting on a desire. They're not just doing it and not desiring it, obviously. So the desire existed, the behavior existed. But never before the late 19th century did anyone conceive of something called a sexual identity. This was never anybody's identity. No one ever said, I'm gay, I'm a gay person. That whole concept didn't exist, okay? There were people who engaged in behavior with members of the same sex. But that was it. It was an action that you did or didn't do. It was not an identity, okay? It becomes an identity slowly starting in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And by the time you get to the 60s, the identity really becomes crystallized when gays, right, sort of come out of the closet, so quote unquote, publicly and start to demand public rights. And then it becomes like a crystallized social identity, right? Which it just never was in the past. So even in ancient Greece, Greece you mentioned, you had the phenomenon of a fully grown man who would take a male youth, like a teenager, as a protege, someone who he would mentor and introduce to the ways of the world and a trade maybe. And part of that would include a sexual relationship, which obviously is homosexual because it's like one male to another. But that's not the same as like what we're talking about today, because this was kind of semi-institutionalized, but it was not seen as a permanent thing. And it was not something that was exclusion. I mean, that man was married and had kids. And that boy, who was the passive partner in that relationship.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Okay. Yep. Inshallah.
Okay. So we'll go till 55, inshallah. We'll break the salah.
Okay. So anyway, so I was saying before that boy who was, the protege of this older man, when he grew up, he then got married, had kids, and then took a youth himself at that age. Do you know what I'm saying? So it was a kind of a different thing. This was not like a lifelong, like, okay, I'm part, and it was not an identity thing. That's what I'm saying. Even in that case, it was not, no one said this is kind of who I am. This is who I am as a person. And today, that's very much how it is. And this changes the nature of the discussion. When I was growing up in the 80s, right, you could still hear someone say, people still ask, well, what do you think about homosexuality? Because we're starting to talk about it more, because it was becoming more visible. So people would say, well, what do you think about homosexuality? That was the term we used, homosexuality. And it was understood that you were asking what was the person's moral position. What is your position on the moral nature of these relationships or acts? It was understood that that's what you were asking. You didn't have to spell it out. And most people's response was like, oh yeah, that's wrong. I don't agree. I think that's wrong, morally wrong. Okay? Today, you can't even ask the question anymore. There is no question about acts because we don't conceive of it anymore in terms of acts. Zina is an act. Drinking alcohol is an act. But once you talk about LGBT, like that's why I say we shouldn't use the term because that's an identity term. It's a term that's naming a group of people, not an action. So no one asks anymore, what do you think about homosexuality? Meaning, what do you think about the moral nature of those acts? People only ask, the only question left that can be asked is, and there's only one right answer, where do you stand on what? LGBT rights, right? The political and social rights of a particular minority community. That it became a political social question of abstract equality and rights, and not a question of the morality of particular acts. So there's been a massive paradigm shift, a massive, massive paradigm shift. And our youth now are coming up in this world where this new paradigm is the paradigm that's at play. So they too are just, imbibing from the environment that, okay, there's this thing called a gay identity. Being gay is what somebody essentially is. And if we don't affirm their relationships or their sexual behavior, then we are excluding them as a person. We're canceling them. We're erasing them. That's the word they use, erasure, right? We are not, affirming their full human dignity, all of these like moral language that's used, right? That because it's no longer seen as an act. Okay, zina, we said, was very taboo in this society. Now it became very widespread. But if we say as Muslims, well, we don't accept zina, it's forbidden in our religion, people will say, oh, well, that's kind of old-fashioned sounding or prude or whatever. But they're not going to say, oh, you're this evil bigot, or something. Like they're just going to say that's an old-fashioned moral view. Or you say, we don't drink alcohol. They'll say, yeah, okay, that's kind of strict. They should be able to see the reason. I mean, the ill effects of alcohol are very apparent, very, very obvious. But anyway, but once you say, well, we don't accept also, just like we don't accept zina between a man and woman, we also don't accept like same-sex behavior. all of a sudden you get a very different reaction from many people, and they get angry and upset, and you're a bigot and you're hateful, and you don't believe in equality, and you want to discriminate and all of this stuff. You say, whoa, hold on. I thought we were just talking about actions, and for them, no, it's not like that's what it means to say that now there's an identity paradigm. They only understand it in terms of, okay, this is who a person fundamentally is. Before, it was something that you did, not something that you were. Now it's something that you are, okay? And I was telling, we're with Dr. Yahya in the car, and I said, now, even if you talk about zina 50, 60 years on, right? Even though people's moral opinion in this society has changed on it, the terms of the question are the same. Like, you would still be asking, what do you think about the morality of a particular action, right? Most people will say, oh yeah, it's not a big deal, it's fine, as long as there's consent. We as Muslims say, no, it's wrong, okay? But everyone understands that we're still talking about the moral position of an action. Like, the terms of the debate did not change, although the opinions change within those same terms. But when it comes to homosexuality, it's not the case. The terms have changed. You're not allowed to talk about the actions anymore, and you're not allowed to question their morality, because it's not a question of acts anymore. It's a question of, again, personal identity. And so this completely changes. And again, our youth are coming into it with those assumptions because they're born in the culture, and just like, it's part of your worldview, and it's like your language. If you grow up here, you're just going to speak English. Like, you don't know how or why, like you just acquire it from the environment. And similarly, these concepts, you acquire them too. So our youth come, well, why would Islam discriminate against gay people? It's like, whoa, that whole paradigm is wrong. The whole paradigm is not valid, and we need to question it and say, we don't talk about it in those terms. We don't conceive of it in those terms. We have a different way of approaching it. Because as long as you're going to accept those terms, you're never going to be able to make sense of the Sharia. You'll never be able to make sense of Islamic teachings. And they will seem unjust to you, arbitrary, unfair, just like they do to many people who are not Muslims, because you're operating on the same paradigm, right? So this idea of the whole framework, how we look at things, is extremely important. And I think that, we can obviously come back and talk more details about it, but we have to, when we're talking with our youth, we have to take a big step back and to build an entire Islamic framework, not just of, because we said before, LGBT for us, is about behavior first and foremost. There are other aspects to it which are important, but first and foremost, like, we need to know, are certain acts and behaviors and relationships halal or haram? Like, we need to start there, because if they're haram, we can't indulge them, and we can't support them, and we can't normalize them, and we can't promote them, okay? So we need to start there. Now, the other things about it, how someone who's dealing with these desires, how to, that's a real thing. We can't just ignore it. So, but all of that comes after, we need to know where we stand morally on the issue. And so for us as Muslims, it's a question still of the morality of particular acts, which, as I said, is a subset of like sexual morality more generally, which is a subset of our whole view of like gender and male and female and sexuality and all of that stuff, that whole can of worms. Okay, which is a subset of just our morals and ethics more generally. Where do we derive moral norms from? How do we know what's right and wrong? Is it derived through reason? Is it social custom? Is it divine revelation? Right? We have divine revelation. Allah, commands and prohibits. Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. We understand too, but I'm just saying, like, all of this, we have to build that whole paradigm. Only when you build that whole paradigm and people understand it and see the logic behind it and understand how it also reflects the reality of things as they are, because Allah is, He's revealing to us the truth of the world that He's created. Only in that context, now we can talk. You want to talk about homosexual relationships or behavior? Okay, now we can do that because I've set up the framework to do it. And I have a framework in terms of which I can now address that in my own language, our own language, okay? This is halal, this is haram, this is a kabira, this is this. This is something that you make tawbah from. This is something that, these are our concepts. Not, are you a bigot and do you believe in equality or not? Like, this is a meaningless question. Like, that's not what it's about. That's simply not what it's about. That's like a completely different universe. Okay? And so, yeah, so that is kind of, the larger thing here. If you're just going to jump straight into LGBT using that term and conceding all of the assumptions of the going paradigm, then just forget about it. Like, you will not be able to answer any question to any like youth who's affected by this paradigm in any way that's like, that, kind of convincing or satisfying, because they're not primed for it. They're operating on a different paradigm. And until we can reestablish and rearticulate our own paradigm, we're going to have a lot of trouble navigating the issue. So I hope that wasn't too abstract, but let's stop there and come back after prayer.
We'll come back after prayer. We'll do primarily Q&A, inshallah?
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah, exactly. And then if I need to show more slides, that's fine. But I want to hear more from. Yeah, I think it's good. Yeah.
For the Q&A, we'll try to.
Yep. I've already sent these to Sister Mehnaz or Sister Muzammila. So, and anyway, I'll tell you after. But these slides go along with the talk that Brother Mubin mentioned, and you can actually download them straight from YouTube, from the talk. They're in the episode description. So it's all publicly available, and so we can direct you to that talk, inshallah.
And if you come back, I'll try to make sure that the question priority comes for people who are here, just because you're going to be following questions from what's done instead of walking in fresh. So.
Right. Okay.
If you would like to ask a question anonymously, there's a QR code you can scan there to take your form.
Perfect.
There's 2 on the sister's side and 2 on the brother's side here, but you can ask a question
Beyond all this.
You try to get, it helps them have a new name. You don't go beside them. They can't, no one wants to be called beside them.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
حقا لا إله إلا الله. استقيموا للصلاة يرحمني ويرحمكم الله. استووا اعتدلوا. Straighten the lines, fill in the gaps, foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder. Recall the niyyah for Salatul Isha. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ولا يملك الذين يدعون من دونه الشفاعة إلا من شهد بالحق وهم يعلمون. ولئن سألتهم من خلقهم ليقولن الله فأنى يؤفكون. وقيله يا رب إن هؤلاء قوم لا يؤمنون فاصفح عنهم وقل سلام فسوف يعلمون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حميم والكتاب المبين إنا أنزلناه في ليلة مباركة إنا كنا منذرين فيها يفرق كل أمر حكيم أمرا من عندنا إنا كنا مرسلين رحمة من ربك إنه هو السميع العليم رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إن كنتم موقنين لا إله إلا هو يحيي ويميت ربكم ورب آبائكم الأولين بل هم في شك يلعبون فارتقب يوم تأتي السماء بدخان مبين يغشى الناس هذا عذاب أليم ربنا اكشف عنا العذاب إنا مؤمنون أنى لهم الذكرى وقد جاءهم رسول مبين ثم تولوا عنه وقالوا معلم مجنون إنا كاشف العذاب قليلا إنكم عائدون يوم نبطش البطشة الكبرى إنا منتقمون ولقد فتنا قبلهم قوم فرعون وجاءهم رسول كريم أن أدوا إلي عباد الله إني لكم رسول أمين وأن لا تعلوا على الله إني آتيكم بسلطان مبين وإني عذت بربي وربكم أن ترجمون وإن لم تؤمنوا لي فاعتزلون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. ربنا لك الحمد. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين، آمين. فدعا ربه أن هؤلاء قوم مجرمون، فأسر بعبادي ليلا إنكم متبعون، واترك البحر رهوا إنهم قوم مغرقون. كم تركوا من جنات وعيون وزروع ومقام كريم ونعمة كانوا فيها فاكهين، كذلك وأورثناها قوما آخرين. فما بكت عليهم السماء والأرض وما كانوا منظرين. ولقد نجينا بني إسرائيل من العذاب المهين من فرعون، إنه كان عاليا من المسرفين. ولقد اخترناهم على علم على العالمين، وآتيناهم من الآيات ما فيه بلاء مبين. إن هؤلاء ليقولون إن هي إلا موتتنا الأولى وما نحن بمنشرين. فأتوا بآبائنا إن كنتم صادقين. أهم خير أم قوم تبع والذين من بعدهم أهلكناهم إنهم كانوا قوما مجرمين. وما خلقنا السماوات والأرض وما بينهما لاعبين، ما خلقناهما إلا بالحق ولكن أكثرهم لا يعلمون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. ربنا لك الحمد حمدا طيبا مباركا. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We currently have a program going on in the QA wing titled Parenting in a Changing World. And the program is about how we can navigate the current world with regards to LGBT, how we as parents or as kids or students or people in the workplace can navigate the world considering all of these issues that are going on. So please join us in the QA wing. We're about to have a Q&A session right now, inshallah.
Yeah. How do I stop casting this? Yeah.
Just escape out of here, go to your browser.
Do I go to this these three dots?
No.
Escape.
And go to your Chrome browser.
Yeah.
And then go to the
It was up here, yeah. Wasn't it up here?
Exactly, yeah. Just hit stop. The stop button, there's a bunch of them, but just
Oh, okay.
I would hit all of them. Looks like
All of them.
yeah, stop all. Yep.
Okay.
That should take care of that. Go down, see if it's casting anymore.
Okay. All right, Bismillah. So you have questions that came in on the QR?
Yeah.
Or okay. Let's see if there are any questions first, like live, and then we can maybe go back and forth between. Yeah. Yeah, brother. Just raise your voice, please. So the question was, do you have any tips about how to talk to someone from the LGBT community in a social environment, like like a non-Muslim environment, high school, like in a public high school? I mean, like, all right, in a public high school, there are plenty of people who do all sorts of things, right, and who believe all sorts of things, and we obviously have to deal with people, right? So I think when it comes to someone who is, says, okay, they identify as like LGBT or whatever, it's not something you need to pick a fight with. If they ask you, well, what do you think about LGBT or gay rights or homosexuality or whatever, you can just be forthright that, like in my religion, there is a context for sexual behavior, right? And this is not something we accept. You're not imposing it on them, obviously, because you can't really do that. But, you say what it is that we hold to be true. I think that probably someone who's living that lifestyle is not someone that you would take to be your closest friend, just like people are out drinking and clubbing and having sex with like boyfriends and girlfriends. They might be an acquaintance of yours or someone at school. You'll treat them normal, like, whatever, but you're not going to take them as your closest friend. Do you know what I'm saying? I think when it comes to this issue, like, because we are dealing with people of all stripes, in society, we should probably just have like a common standard. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Yeah. I would just say, I don't know if they would, like, it's hard because, again, you're talking from a different paradigm, but you would say it's not a question of discriminating against rights. Islam is talking about particular behaviors, some of which are permitted and some of which are prohibited, some of which are moral, some of which are immoral. Like, that's what, just change the terms of the debate. That's what it is. Say that's what it, for me as a Muslim, like, that's primarily what it's about. Don't let them catch you out on, okay, do you believe in discrimination or equality, right? You say that's not what it's an issue of for us. Say we have to, first it's a discussion about what is the proper place of sexuality, what is the proper way a family should look. There's all these other questions that come into it. I like to say, and this is not necessarily a one-line answer, but the whole question of gay marriage, for example, which passed in 2015, up until like I think 2012, Ustad Mubin would know better, both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, who are both Democrats, were against gay marriage. Up until about 10 years ago, both of them, as Democrats, said publicly marriage is between a man and a woman. Of course, we believe in gay rights and all of this, but that right simply did not include marriage, because the idea was that marriage just is between a man and a woman. That's just what marriage is. We can't change that. Marriage is and always has been a joining between a male and a female to found a natural family. That's just the nature of it. And they were saying this publicly just 10 years ago, okay? Now, most Republicans wouldn't dare say that. And so Muslims now were like to the left, so to speak, of where Bill Clinton was and Hillary and Barack Obama 10 years ago. Like, that's absurd. Do you see what I'm saying? Look how fast the discourse changes. Look how fast it changes. So what I like to say is that for you to conceive, they were very successful in turning it into strictly an abstract question of political rights and equality. And this was planned. There was a book written in the late 1980s called After the Ball, How America Will Overcome Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. That's the name of the book. It was written by two Harvard PhDs. One of them was a psychologist, and one of them was a marketing executive, okay? And marketing is all about psychology and manipulating psychology. So both of them have a PhD from Harvard in how to manipulate the human mind. And they wrote this whole manifesto of how we are going to change the entire cultural framework precisely to make people think, oh, this is just a question of equality and rights and decency. And they said in there, they said, we have to take the focus off of gay sex, particularly because most people, when they hear about that, they're kind of like, especially back then, they kind of like have this negative reaction. So they said, we need to stop talking about the sexual aspect of it. We need to downplay that, and we need to turn it into an abstract question of social rights. That's it, an abstract question. When you make it abstract, do you believe in equality or do you believe in discrimination? Well, that's very abstract. Well, of course, who's going to say, yeah, I believe in discrimination? It's like a bad term. Do you believe in being fair and just, or do you believe in being hateful and bigoted? I mean, how is anyone going to answer? So when you turn it into an abstract question, oh, well, I believe in justice and equality and, acceptance and not being a bigot. Okay, great. Well, all right, where are you taking me? Well, if that's true, then you have to accept 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So I say, like, to even conceive of gay marriage as nothing but a question of simple, straightforward equality, like do you extend one more right to like a particular group, or do you withhold that right from them? For you to even conceive of it as being nothing but that, there are so many assumptions that you have to have already conceded. Now, let me tell you what I mean. If you think that gay marriage makes sense and that it is justifiable, then you have already conceded that men and women are not different, that mothers and fathers are interchangeable, that it is not the right of a child to have a mother and a father, because a gay relationship by design deliberately deprives a child of either a mother or a father, or both. Okay? You have to concede that there is no special relationship to, or there should be no special social or legal recognition of a man and a woman coming together and having children, and their natural children. Like, that kind of natural reproductive model does not deserve any particular legal or social recognition as being somehow normative. Okay? And that two men coming together and getting one of their female friends to carry their sperm with her egg or someone else's, and then have the baby and hand it over to that this is perfectly the exact equivalent morally of a man and a woman marrying and having a natural child. Okay? And that child's rights are not being violated by being deprived of a parent. And that two mothers are just as good as a mother and a father, because there's no difference between the two. And we can, 3, 4, 5, 6 major premises, all of which are highly debatable, that you have to have already conceded in order to be able to even conceptualize this as nothing but a straightforward. Do you believe in offering, equal access to marriage to this minority group, or do you think it should be arbitrarily withheld by like discrimination? Okay? For you to be like, yeah, well, we're a minority too, and all minorities, we all stand or fall together. I mean, again, you have to have conceded all of these premises, none of which we would concede, none of which. All of them we'd say, no, we don't agree with this, or this or that. What is justice? Justice is to treat things according to their nature. Okay? So it's not just to treat gay marriages, so quote unquote gay marriages, the same as heterosexual marriages, unless there really are no substantial differences between them. If there are substantial differences between them, then it doesn't make sense to treat them the same, because they're not the same. And the very question is, are there any substantial differences or not? That's what the debate was all about in this society itself. That's what the debate was about before 2015. And most people, every time they put it up to a state referendum, because marriage laws, by the way, are state. These are state laws, they're not federal laws in the United States, right? Marriage and divorce and all of that, it differs from state to state. Every time they put up a referendum in the states to redefine marriage, or to, define it as being between a man and a woman, they tried in 30 states. Is that right? You would know. 30 states, every single time it failed when they tried to redefine marriage to incorporate same-sex, so-called same-sex marriages. Every single time it failed. The people did not want it. And when they realized that we keep failing in every state that we try it, they said, okay, we need to take it up to the next level and just have the Supreme Court come in at the federal level and declare all of these laws, unconstitutional because they're discriminatory. But this is purely, again, you can only see it as random discrimination if you've already, again, I hope it's clear, conceded all of these other points, but those points are exactly what the debate was all about. So there's no neutral ground here. And it's unacceptable for Muslims to say, well, we can't impose our morals on others. We just want like equality for everyone because we believe in like freedom or something. This is nonsense. Like just doesn't make any sense. Why don't we have incestuous marriages? Oh no. Look, I mean, in Germany, right after they passed the Obergefell decision here, which allowed for gay marriage in 2015, there was some high ethics commission or something in Germany that made a recommendation to the German government saying, based on purely secular liberal principles, that the state has no right, or state has no interest, that's the technical term, the state has no interest in prohibiting the consensual behavior of private behavior of adults, even if they're like a brother and a sister or something like that, okay? Maybe some people consider that immoral, but the state has no right to legislate that. And therefore, we recommend the High Ethics Commission. We recommend the German state to repeal all laws that criminalize incest. The German government, to its credit, did not follow the advice of the High Ethics Commission, okay? But their reasoning was very curious, or very telling, I should say. Their reasoning was not, okay, this is wrong and bad, and no, we're not going to do that. Their reasoning was the German public would not accept this at this time because there's a strong feeling against incest and it would not be acceptable, so we're not going to pass it. Meaning, if 20 years from now, there's enough of a campaign and a desensitization campaign and a lot of propaganda, and Disney starts, all these start normalizing incest the way they've normalized homosexual relationships, right? And people's opinions change and they become less dogmatic and more open to like diverse relationships. And, who says that, family members, who are you to have the prejudice? You don't like it, don't do it. You think it's gross, don't have an incestual relationship. That's what they say. You don't like gay relationships, don't have one. Same thing, okay? If in 20 years from now, that's where the German public is, or any public, then the government presumably would, change the legislation accordingly because, in fact, the state has no quote-unquote interest in, prohibiting such behavior. So where would Muslims, at what point would you say as a Muslim, no, this is something that is just inherently wrong, that I will never support no matter what the society does, Or are we just going to roll, already 10 years later, we're to the left of Hillary Clinton 10 years ago. We're like this conservative religious community. We believe in Allah. We pray 5 times a day. We don't drink alcohol. We don't have zina. We believe in the revelation of Allah. We believe in heaven and hell. And all of a sudden, mashallah, 10 years later, we're like to the left of where the Democrats were 10 years ago. This is nonsense. This is totally absurd. It's totally absurd.
We have a lot of questions.
Okay, sorry. I'm very long-winded. We'll go back and forth, because we have some on that,
Let me take two from, I'll take 2 questions from here, and then we can go back to the floor, and then we'll come back, because we have a lot of questions that have come in. So the first 2 that I'll ask, first question, should Muslim parents allow non-Muslim children that identify as LGBTQ to reside in the home? Second question, how should someone feel about a gay sibling?
So the first one, a non-Muslim person identifies as LGBT, and should they reside? But this isn't a Muslim family, like. So a parent has converted to Islam, and the child is potentially. Okay. I mean, so I think again. So if someone is engaged in this kind of behavior, they're doing something haram. We have to ask, because we tend to think of this as a very peculiar case, and we all of a sudden, have totally different set of standards, and sometimes it gets confusing. If the person were doing some other type of major sin, what would our reaction be? If they were having zina with a opposite sex person, that's also haram. That's a kabira, actually. Would we say that's wrong and we try to appeal to them and try to get them to change their behavior and have sabr until they do that? Or would we kick them out? I mean, I don't know. It depends on the situation. But I'm just saying those considerations are similar. I think if the person someone has left Islam altogether and they left for this reason and they're completely intransigent and don't want to hear anything about maybe conceiving of their desires in a different way or living their life in a different way, and they're disrupting the household. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Can you just kick someone out? I can't just give a general thing. But I think in general, especially if it's your child, people grow up with this paradigm. They have desires. Desires can be very strong. And they're told 24/7. This is who you are. This is your core identity. This is your true self. You need to be true to yourself. There's a lot of propaganda. And I think before taking the drastic step of like turning someone out of a house, that one should exhaust all possibilities and to the extent possible, have sabr, la'allahu, أو لعلها, may he or chance he or she would return or change. So I find it hard to give just like a. Now, what was the second question?
So there's actually multiple questions that are along these lines, but just about siblings, family members that are sort of LGBT identified.
Yeah, again, how to feel about it. Like obviously someone who's a Muslim and a believing Muslim is not going to be happy about it. Like you're not going to feel happy about it. How do you treat the person? Again, I think is going to depend. There's a big difference between someone who comes to you as your brother or sister, like sibling at home, or brother and sister in Islam, and says, listen, I have something I want to confide in you. I trust you, and I have these same-sex desires, and I don't know how to deal with them. I want to be a good Muslim. I don't want to do anything haram, but I feel this, and I didn't choose these desires, and I need support, need help. That, to me, is very clear. Of course, you support that person, you help them. You don't just say, oh, that's disgusting. I can't believe you have those desires. Get out of my face. That's a terrible reaction. You should look at what the person is saying. They want to be on the right path. They are dealing with something and didn't ask for those desires, and they're trying to live according to Islam. This is good. They're mujahid. They're doing jihad fi sabilillah against their desires like anyone else who has heterosexual desires and they want to commit zina and they don't do it because they're withholding themselves. Okay? So there's a big difference between that and someone who out and proud and this is who I am and the deen is wrong and Allah wouldn't oppress me and I'm gonna bring my boyfriend or girlfriend home or whatever. This is a different thing. A family has a right to say no, you're not bringing a boyfriend home. I'm sorry. We're having a family event. You're not bringing a same-sex partner. Just like presumably we wouldn't allow someone's daughter has a boyfriend. You're not going to be very happy about that. And you're not going to let her bring the boyfriend to the next family function or the son to bring a girlfriend, right? I'm sorry. It's not acceptable. Even if they're doing that on the side, you're not going to be happy about it. And you're going to try to. So there's a big difference between those two cases. Again, I think in general, especially on the private level, you should try to not shut the door in someone's face. You should try to keep the door open for the person to find a way back to Allah and to make tawbah. In the public realm, if someone comes to the masjid and they say, I'm out and proud and I come in with a big rainbow shirt and I want to declare my identity and be accepted as a gay Muslim or lesbian Muslim in the sense that people are applauding me and essentially conceding that my behavior and relationships are halal and cool and fine. No, I'm sorry. Now you are undermining the entire norm of the community. You're changing the social space. You are undermining the norms that define who we are as Muslims. This is not acceptable, right? So you have to be balanced because people have the right to come to the masjid and not have, things that are radically opposed to the deen being shoved in their face at the masjid. Or if I send my kid to an Islamic camp and some kid, you told me there was some, this happens. Some person in a Muslim camp said, oh, she was a lesbian and she was making fun of the other girls because they were attracted to boys. I mean, that's the normal thing. And she was, okay, you don't want to turn this one girl away from Islam, but at the same time, other people have rights too. And the camp has a right. And, I send my kid to that camp. I didn't send my kid to be propagandized by someone who is saying that, they're lesbian and they're making fun of my kids because they're not gay. That's not why I sent them to an Islamic camp. So I have a right too that doesn't go on at the camp. So at one point you say to the girl or the parents, I'm sorry, your daughter can't come because she's causing fitna here. Just as if she were to come and say, you know what, I tried weed the other day and it was so cool. And, oh, you guys don't do weed? You're so backwards and dumb. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. You can't come to the Islamic camp if that's going to be your behavior. Again, we don't make an exception just because you say you're gay and it's your identity. Well, I'm sorry. You can't come and just, propagandize in a Muslim space. But if this is someone at your home, they're your relative. What are you going to do? They're your brother or sister. I mean, you could cut them off, but you shouldn't do that unless really I think it's affecting you or they're trying to really impose themselves. You should try to leave that rope, because people go through phases and they go through all sorts of things. And in general, you want to leave the door to repentance open, especially if it's not undermining, like other people's rights, basically. So,
There's a number of questions here.
okay, you're grouping them.
Yeah. So should we continue
Yep.
here? Okay.
Oh, or sorry, was there a question from the floor?
I didn't know if we want to do one from the floor and then we'll go back. Let's do back and forth.
Okay, yep. So the question is, you're in a public school, I guess. You're in a public school and someone in that school, a non-Muslim, like a Christian, because you said their book. So someone from a different, like not a Muslim, you said they're trying to get you to do something and then you don't do it. You mean something sexual, like a same-sex thing? Or just anything like, why don't you come and drink with us, or why don't you vape or whatever? Yeah. And then you don't do it and they get upset. Why? Yeah, I mean, people get upset for all sorts of reasons. One, they don't like being challenged. When you say, I don't do that, you're implicitly challenging what they're doing, and you're basically saying that it's not right. And people know what's right and wrong. Like, they can be confused, but deep down, people also know. And so when someone stands up and says, no, well, I don't do that behavior, that kind of makes them feel guilty, even if they don't admit it. So they might be lashing out because you made them feel bad, or they feel that you're judging them, or, whatever reason. Or they just like to make fun of people for being square, like whatever. There might be different reasons for that. But the point is, you have to choose your friends wisely. Al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that a person is upon the religion of his companion. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلْ. So, look carefully at whom you befriend. And that's also reported in the New Testament, that the Christians read that Jesus, peace be upon him, also said, show me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are. It's the same meaning. Show me who your friends are, and I'll know who you are. I don't need to know you. Just show me who your friends are, and I know who you are, because you're going to be like your friends. You chose the people that the people you choose to befriend are the ones that you think are worthy of befriending. Or you befriended them and you became like them because al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi. A person is on the, either way, you're going to be like your friends. So you have to protect your own soul first and foremost, and you don't owe anything to anyone, right? If someone's getting you to do something bad, you don't owe them to follow them in it just because they're going to be offended. That too bad. Let them be offended. Go find another friend, right? You don't have to be rude, but you should be principled, and you'll find that a lot of people will respect you for that. I was in boarding school way back when, and someone asked me, there was a paper that we had to do or something, or exam or whatever, and he said, can I see your paper? Like, he wanted to copy from me, and I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't. That's cheating. I can't give that to you. And he wasn't expecting that, because I guess I wasn't aware of it, but I guess people kind of did that. And he told me months later, like before he graduated, he's like, you know what? Like, I was kind of taken aback because I asked you. He said, but I really respected you, because when I asked you for your answers, you turned me down. Because he knew it was wrong, and no one had the backbone, but I kind of just instinctively said no. And he didn't say, but months later, he said, I really respected you for that. So just hold your head high, stand on principle, be polite but firm, and people will really respect that, because it's so rare. Yeah.
Let's go back here. I think there are a few questions we can try to sort of group together. And these questions deal with the issue of rights and respect. And so this has come up as a theme in a couple of questions. But I'll highlight two, and I think they cover sort of the general gist of some of the other questions that are coming in. One of the questions says, is it wrong to give our children exposure to media with LGBT characters if it's done with the understanding that homosexuality and transsexuality is wrong Islamically? It's not logical to raise our kids in a bubble, nor do I want to foster any hatred within them for LGBT individuals. A second question says, what's the difference between being okay with LGBT individuals having their rights and individuals of different religions, such as Hinduism, having similar rights? Muslims don't agree with Hindu or Christian beliefs, for example, but there's an expectation to coexist peacefully with them, with mutual respect, genuinely trying to understand. And I think that those two kind of encapsulate some of the other questions overall about, you know, are we teaching hate? How do we have mutual respect? You know, we don't want our children to be hateful, sort of bigots, that type of thing.
So I think the first question about you know, the media, right, and shows with characters. When children come into the world, you know, and you're raising them, you are formatting the way they are going to view the world, and you're building a value system. And that value system is reinforced by your behavior, by your teachings, by what you expose them to, by what they read, by what they hear, right? All of that, you know, cements a particular view of the world in them and a particular moral structure. So as Muslim parents, you know, it is our duty to expose our children to the types of influences which are going to build a correct moral structure, and not to expose them to things that present immoral things, either neutrally or moral, because that would be the opposite of what we're trying to build. Like, we would not expose them to, at a young age particularly, to shows where people are drinking alcohol or having premarital sex or something. We would say, no, that's not appropriate for a child to watch, because they're going to be impacted by that, to think that that's okay, and it's not okay. And we don't want them to think it's okay, because it's not. And that will undermine the kind of value system that you're trying to build in them. So again, we don't make an exception when it comes to homosexuality just because some people take it as an identity. That's why I'm saying the whole identity paradigm is very problematic, and it's not one that we accept, right? When I say I'm not going to expose my children to it, it's not because I hate individuals. It's because the action itself is immoral, and I don't want my child to think that it's moral, because it's not. So why would I present them something in a neutral way when it's not? Do you see? So the question presumes the identity paradigm, and I think we have to learn to think beyond that paradigm. Okay, so that's kind of the first question. Of course, you cannot raise your children in a bubble, and the older they get, the more they will be exposed. And at that point, you need to be prepared to say, okay, well, some people do this, some people do that, some people believe this way, some people believe that way. Here's what we affirm, and here's why, right? We believe in Allah, we believe in the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Here's the reasons why we believe in that. Here's what we're instructed by Allah. Here's what we know to be right and wrong according to Allah's revelation, right? Other people in the society believe differently. It's true, there are atheists, there are Christians, Jews, Hindus, people who are agnostic, people who do all sorts of things like zina and drinking alcohol and all sorts of things. And we get along with people in daily life. We don't hate people, even if we think what they're doing is wrong or what they believe is wrong. We still get along with them. Okay? So why is this an exception here? If I don't expose my children to gay characters in movies or cartoons, I'm going to purposely do that so they're not hateful? Like, okay, so are you going to expose them to every other type of behavior at a young age just so they don't hate the people who do it later on? Like, that doesn't, again, that's making an exception for homosexuality. It's what I call gay exceptionalism. And we shouldn't have gay exceptionalism either in a positive or negative. So positive is like, okay, we're going to change our moral standards or the way we do things only when it comes to homosexuality because I'm making a positive exception for it. Negative would be like I said before, I have a friend, a brother, or a sibling who drinks or who does whatever, and I'm ready to kind of be patient and wait, but I find that the person has homosexual desires or something, and all of a sudden, no, get out, leave. That's disgusting. That's negative acceptance. Now you're making an exception for homosexuality. It's like this categorically worse thing than everything else, and you're treating the person as untouchable or something like that. And some people do that. That's wrong. I'm also speaking against that. That's called negative, I call it negative gay exceptionalism, okay? But the positive gay exceptionalism is precisely, well, I need to expose my kids to gay characters because I want them to learn to be like accepting. Well, but why are you only doing that for this particular behavior and not for every other behavior? Because you're also viewing it as an identity thing. And I'm saying that's a trap. The identity thing is a trap, right? We don't hate individuals. I mean, sometimes you do it. I mean, it depends on who the individual is. But someone who simply is like doing something that we know is haram, okay, we don't know their circumstances. There are people who are gay who become Muslim and they leave the lifestyle and they actually come to the deen. It happens. It's not even that infrequent. And I've met such people. Like that happens, right? So we don't just write people off. But at the same time, like when you're teaching your child, you have to teach them, the normative right thing. And certainly you want them to believe that, men and women are distinct and that, sexual relations are only acceptable between a married male and a female. Like that's absolutely fundamental to like Islamic moral teachings. So to purposely like expose them, right? Now the thing is this is everywhere. These characters are everywhere. And I think the other thing too is like when kids are young, they need to be more protected because they're still very fresh and they're still forming their very basic concepts. The older they get, obviously the more they get exposed, because when you're an adult, you're exposed to everything. You need to know how to kind of handle that. And I like to say it's like when you plant a seed, like a tree, when the seed first starts to sprout, it's very delicate, right? Very delicate. So what do? You water it very gently. You expose it to sun and air, but a big windstorm comes by, you protect it. Very hot sun, you protect it. You don't douse it with tons of water, it's going to drown. You have to be very careful. But the more it grows and the stronger it gets, okay, now more stronger winds can come and it's not going to shake it because it's stronger. And that's how the older you get, the more you can okay, I hear all this stuff. I'm not affected. I'm an adult and my worldview is set. And, I know why I believe what I believe and so forth. But it's not really fair, I think, to put a child in situations where you're giving them ambiguous messaging and not expect them to come out confused or to end up, thinking that what is right is wrong and what is wrong is right. Like you expose them to that purposely. So I don't really see a justification for that. And just because you're not exposing them to a gay character in a movie doesn't mean that automatically they're going to hate or have to hate everyone that they might meet later on who identifies as LGBT. They should disapprove of the behavior. You would have to as a Muslim. If you don't, that's like putting your deen kind of in question because now you're questioning Allah's hukum, right? But does it mean you have to have a gut hatred for the person? No, you don't. Some people do, but we can right now we're talking about this and we're saying, you shouldn't have that. So I don't think you have to go to the extreme of, okay, I'm going to purposely allow my child to watch all this LGBT children's programming just so they kind of grow up to be tolerant. I think that's kind of overkill. That's kind of going too much in the other direction, and it's morally ambiguous. You're giving them ambiguous, and you wouldn't do it for anything else, but you're making an exception for homosexuality. And I think that's a problem. Yeah.
The second question was generally rights. So we respect the rights of Christians and Jews and Hindus. We coexist with them peacefully with mutual respect. Why are we averse to extending that to LGBT individuals and persons?
So I think, this idea give people their rights. The whole question is what rights are we talking about? And who has access to them? That's the whole question, right? So that's what the debate is about. When it comes to, is it really equivalent when we're talking about, for example, a society like America that, you have Christians, Jews, Muslims, people who are atheists, whatever. They have their right to worship and to have their buildings and their places like this, okay? We're not making, in a sense, a public claim on the entire society. We're not redefining basic social institutions by having a masjid down the street from a church. The demand I'm talking specific about the demand for marriage. You are asking for a fundamental reconfiguration of a central social institution that everyone participates in, right? You're asking us as a society to, again, say that fathers and mothers don't matter anymore, that natural reproduction doesn't matter anymore, that it's just as normative to have basically elective families rather than families that are, natural. And this has like big moral consequences. That's not to be conceded. So it's, and the other thing too is that the way the LGBT movement, again, why are we being exceptional? I don't see Disney pushing like Christian propaganda. Do you see them? If every other movie they put a cross in there and they had the Virgin Mary and they had themes of like crucifixion, you would be like, wait a minute, like, what are you doing? That's your belief, but why are you putting it in every movie so that everyone adopts it? I don't see them putting, themes from Judaism or Hinduism, like the elephant, like Hindu imagery. I mean, we would be bothered if every Disney movie and every child cartoon you saw those like Hindu imagery. You'd be like, what's going on here? Like, why are they trying to not just give Hindus their private right to have a temple down the street? Which, okay, it's shirk, but Muslims have lived with mushrikeen in the past. I mean, we ruled India for 800 years. I mean, that's like, we have a way of navigating those kinds of differences, but they're also not making public claims like that. You're talking about having a synagogue or a church or a temple or a mosque on a street, essentially. That's very different from, that's not what the LGBT movement is all about. That's what they say, but that's not what, if you look at the reality, that's not what's happening. Because if it is what was happening, why is it infiltrated into every single thing? Why is there a month? I always say, why is there a Pride Month? Why? I mean, they're a minority. Where's my month? Where's our month? Every month, the whole month, November, let's make it Muslim Awareness Month. Children all over the entire country are forced to like learn about Islam, color like masajid, and learn to write their names in Arabic. The girls come to school with hijab like 2 days, to show like their appreciation for Muslim notions of modesty and decorum, right? Because otherwise, they're just hating Muslims and like putting our lives in danger. Like, this is absurd. Like, we want to make dawah, but we would never dream of like imposing it like that top down. Like, that's just, and where is every other group's month? Do you know what I'm saying? Again, why is it in June, every single company, like their color, their whole, you Google, you go on, it's like rainbow, Google. And every company like rolls out its entire product line in rainbow colors and all of this. Well, who else are they doing this for? What's February? It's Black History Month. It comes and goes. There's a few things here and there. No one makes a big fuss about it. Is there anyone who suffered more than Black people in this country? No. Why aren't we, if there's one group that we're going to go all out for, why isn't it the African American community in their month? It comes and goes and, some activities, but it's not like the entire world like goes and makes sujood to Black America. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, why the gay exceptionalism? Why the gay exceptionalism? That's not equality. That's not equality. They have a very specific status, a very specific agenda, and a very specific way of going about it. And when we just say, oh, well, we're just being, accepting, I don't have to be accepting also of like a Hindu neighbor or to get along with them or respect them as long as they respect me. I don't have to have my children in school, like they can learn about Hinduism as a subject, but they don't need to be like emotionally invested in it. They don't need to be coloring temples and doing Hindu rites and rituals at school. We would never stand for that, or Christian or Jewish or anything. So why are you forcing everyone to like be emotionally invested in the LGBT issue and going through, the motions of like ritualistically kind of endorsing? It's like a religion. This is totally unacceptable. And again, it's exceptional. No other group gets that treatment. So why? Again, I'm throwing the question back at you. I mean, collectively, why? Like, we have to be, I think, more critical and really look at, at it from that angle.
So it's 9 o'clock. What we'll do is we'll take one more question from the floor, and then we'll do the last question here, inshallah. And then we'll close out. Bismillah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's fine. Like you know, it has to be age appropriate. So if you don't believe that your child is ready to kind of hear a more elaborate answer, because that's going to open doors that, you know, you don't think he's ready to get into yet, at least what you're doing is you're reinforcing a particular moral. Like you're saying, ask Allah to guide him. It means what he's doing is wrong. So your child is learning, okay, men shouldn't be wearing makeup and nail polish or whatever it is. He doesn't know why yet, and you're not kind of getting into it, but you're reinforcing a particular moral norm, and you're creating kind of a moral sentiment. So yes, that's good, right? At one point, like you'll have to elaborate more, right? That Allah created men and women differently, that it's, you know, we're not supposed to imitate each other in those types of things. Men have their own distinct dress, women have their own distinct dress. Some items of clothing are shared, but like in every culture, by the way, you have distinct male and female. Even in this culture where they try to eliminate all the differences. You look at any shirt, you can tell immediately whether it's for a man or a woman. This woman's is cut like, you know, curved. Shoes, anything you could tell. Like, why? Laysa dhakaru kal untha. The male is not like the female. Like, it's just, you can't get away from it. It's nature. Okay? Even in these highly like egalitarian societies where they try to erase all these differences, you can't escape it, right? So I think that is, you know, that is a wise way, and you elaborate in an age-appropriate manner as he grows older. Yeah.
So there are a few questions left, but I think you've covered the themes of most of them. What I'll do is I'll just close out with this question, inshallah. So if you're in a position in an advocacy or lobbying position somewhere, like a student council, where should we stand on issues such as book bans and also in content taught in schools? How should we argue our viewpoint? And then, you know, there's one question that's a bit linked here as well, but the ask is, can you come back and do a program for high school and middle school students?
I can come back if I'm invited. So, I mean, yeah, I'm ready to, of course. If you know, if the center wants to do something, I'd be open to it, inshallah. But you have Mubin here, so you don't need me to come. Mubin's local. So, mashallah, I mean, Mubin is really the one who's been writing most about this topic, you know, in English and probably across the board. I mean, really, if you have not seen Mubin's writings, Mubin Vaid, V-A-I-D, you really should check them out, especially on gender, sexuality, LGBT, but then also political engagement more generally. He's very astute politically, where Muslims should be standing, you know, what are the stakes involved in us getting involved in the political game, you know, the moral stakes, like very astute writings, mashallah. So you really don't need me to come down when you have him here. But I would be happy to, and we can also do programs together. We've been working together a lot on this for 2016, a long time it's been, yeah, since I contacted you about the Google article. The question about where we stand on like book bannings and all of this, again, I'm going to try to give an answer like the difficulty is it's always being presented at least by one side, it's always being presented as fairness, justice, bigotry, discrimination, all of that. Like we need to distance ourselves from that framework. When you're talking about what's taught in school, again, apply the same criteria you would apply to anything else. What should be taught in school and what shouldn't be taught in school? When you are teaching something as normative, like, again, all these other religions and beliefs and all of that, like, students are exposed to it in an objective way that this exists. Okay, like, at one point, if a public high school says, there's such thing, there was a gay rights movement in Stonewall 1969, and okay, that's factual, that's fine, we know that, like, okay. But when you are propagating the thing as this is what is normative that you must accept, this would be the equivalent of taking one of those other religions and saying, we're not just saying to people, Jews exist, or Hindus exist, or Muslims exist, and these are their practices, and you know we should respect each other in the society. We're saying this is what is normal. We're teaching you this as the truth. And that's how they're teaching LGBT. They're not just teaching it, they're teaching it as a normative thing. And that's a whole different ballgame, because now you're imposing a particular view, a particular moral view on highly contentious issues. You're imposing it on other people who don't share it. And so I always say, you know, my answer would be like, look, why is it that we don't talk about religion in public schools? You can't even mention God. Why? It's because, I mean, there could be many reasons, but one of them is that in Western society at a particular point of time, right? There were religious wars and a lot of things that led to secularization, political and social secularization, and also the idea of the existence of God, which was completely taken for granted by everybody not too long ago, even in the West, came to be seen as contentious. It came to be seen as contentious. Some people believe, some people are atheists and principled atheists. Before, atheism was just like deviance. But then now you have intellectuals. No, I'm a philosopher and I'm a scientist and I don't believe that there's evidence for God and all of this stuff. So it comes to be seen as a very contentious issue. And they say because it's so contentious and so personal and so, involves people's like core commitments, we just, in a diverse society, we need to take that off the table. Let people believe what they want, but we don't push a particular line. I would say when it comes to things like sexuality, gender, these are also very close to people's core commitments. These are very close to what your worldview is all about, right? It's not quite the level of like belief in God, but it's close, right? What you believe about how people should live and families and sexuality, because it's something very vital in human literally, because it's like where life comes from. So sexuality is never neutral in any society. It's never neutral. And because there is great disagreement on sexual norms today in this culture after the sexual revolution, we should apply the same principle. This is very contentious. You have well-meaning people on both sides, to use their terms, secular terminology. I'm saying that I was asked what would be your response be. You have well-meaning people on both sides. People have very divergent views on this. People who, you're respecting people's religion, allegedly, well, their beliefs about gender and sexuality are very much a part of people's religious beliefs. For us, this is part of what it means to be a Muslim, right? So if you're telling me I can't have these beliefs, you're telling me I can't be Muslim. So you're not tolerating me either. You're not tolerating me as a Muslim. You're tolerating me as a token Muslim, hijab, different skin color, whatever. That's just tokenization. Right? But if I have a belief that differs substantially from yours and you're not willing to allow me to have that or to express it, then you're the bigot. You're not tolerating me. You're not tolerating Muslims, right? And so the short answer, because this is something very this would be my secular answer to like the larger, because this is so contentious, you cannot push one particular view on everybody, just like you cannot push one particular religious view. And they're going to say, well, there's always some view. If you don't push LGBT, then you're just reinforcing heteronormativity. Well, I guess, but the point is, leave it to the families. Just like you leave religion and God to the families, leave sexual morality to the families. It's a private. I'm not sending my kid to school to learn about condoms and to learn about gay sex and to learn about all of this other stuff. Teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's. Okay, the old-fashioned way, and let me deal with the rest. That would be my response. So this book banning, yeah, we don't want these materials in the schools. Now, when you say book banning, like it makes it sound like some witch hunt or whatever. But again, this is all propaganda. This is all like the game. Like, of course we're gonna ban books. Some of them. You don't want pornographic materials in an elementary school. And some of these books are like literally pornographic. If you look at the images and the words in them, they're literally pornographic. Shameless. They have no business being even in a high school. Okay? So we're not going to be kowtowed, oh, you're banning books. Yeah, I am. I'm banning, so what? Yeah, of course. Like, would you allow me to put books that, let's put racist books from the old whatever, South or something like that. You're going to say, no, we can't have racist books. Why not? Are you going to ban books? Well, yeah, because it's harmful to people. Well, okay. So you have a reason for banning some books. Well, I have a reason for banning some books too. Do you see? Are you going to allow like Nazi propaganda in a school, like just that's like book? Like you're going to say, no, this is inappropriate, right? Or a book that demonizes Jews or whatever. That's not going to be allowed. It's going to be banned. Why? We said, let people read. There's freedom of speech. Read whatever you want. Are you a medieval, like whatever, you want to ban books? I say, well, what? Okay, just tell people it's wrong, but let them read it, whatever. No, we're not going to allow that here. They ban books all the time. But it's only called banning books when you ban books that they want in there, right? So again, we need to like, don't fall for like, again, I said that language is never innocent. Words are not innocent. They carry baggage. And before just repeating what someone has said, who said it? Why did they say it? In what context? Deconstruct it. Be skeptical of it first. If it's a buzzword, avoid it like the plague. Okay? And then you see that it's not, it's not the way they say it is, right? Banning books, it's a scare term. It's a scare techniques. It's to make you go, oh no, I would never ban books. I don't want to be looked at like a backwards person or something like that, or a Republican. Ooh.
طيب inshallah. So it's 9:15, so we'll close up inshallah. It's up to Dr. Sharif on how much longer he can stay for people who may want to ask him individually after. But Jazakumullah khair everyone for coming out tonight and for Dr. Sharif's presentation and handling of our questions and answers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us, our families and our youth. Allahumma ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Assalamun ala al-mursalin. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Subhanakallah hamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.